you arrive in Bali, where to from there, and how do you go about doing it?
The only way is to go there and have this big trip that takes a bunch of days to get to the spot, and then you got to negotiate with a local fisherman with a sketchy boat, and then just go check it. And even then, the best spot in the world, some days the tuna just won't be there.
Mate, so Indo, you said like, were you around the really populated areas, like under 10 meters, kind of not a lot around? I hear lots of stuff about like massive down currents, hectic current, particularly out where you're on the dogtooth ground and stuff like that. Talk to me about like, you know, let's go through a couple of options. Like, so someone goes there on a DIY trip. I mean, let's not give out GPS coordinates, but I mean, you arrive in Bali, where to from there, and how do you go about doing it, like with regards to being an English, predominantly maybe just an English speaking person?
Yeah, if you're only speaking English, you can do it, but it'll be way harder. First of all, just quick, the locals, some of the local Spearos are really amazing. Like some
Yeah.
of the best Spearos I've ever seen. They're diving deep and we'll go out for a day and I'll see nothing and they'll come back with just piles of fish.
Yeah. I didn't
It's
mean
a
that. I just meant like I think you said on Brett's show, like a lot of them just
a lot of
lack
them
that
don't.
sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people they're not free dive trained, that's for sure, even the really good ones. But it's a skill level that I think is born from them just trying to feed their families. And like these guys are just so amazing at spearfishing. There's so many guys who are commercial spearos, like they'll take people like me or any tourist out with them and they'll charge them a bit of money, but they're going out anyways. And they're out catching their peers who are rod and reel pretty much every day of the week.
Oh,
It's
wow.
cool to see. But yeah, about down currents. Yeah, so you go from Bali. It's sort of what I love to do for spearfishing now. I don't spearfish in Bali so much anymore because the flights here are very cheap. You can fly anywhere for like $100, maybe $200, depending on where you're going when you buy the ticket. But it's very cheap. And then anywhere not in Bali within Indonesia is incredibly cheap. The food is a couple of bucks a day. The hotels and places to stay, if there are hotels, it's in the realm of $10 or $20 a night, and that's for something nice. You could always just stay with like a local family for whatever you feel like giving them. They'd probably let you stay there for free
Wow.
if you wanted to, but you should give them something. Anyways,
Yeah.
yeah, it's sort of the biggest doggies are in the areas where the strongest currents are. And you sort of just like look for channels where there'd be a lot of water passing through, and then like a bommy or an island or a rock within that channel. And like, there's almost definitely going to be dogtooth tuna on there. Maybe 100% there's going to be on dogtooth tuna on there anywhere in Indonesia. The question is how big they are. And the only way is to go there and have this big trip that takes a bunch of days to get to the spot. And then you got to negotiate with a local fisherman with a sketchy boat, and then just go check it. And even then, the best spot in the world, some days the tuna just won't be there. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. Not that much money compared to probably anywhere else you want to go after big tuna, but definitely a lot of time.
Okay, cool. So
The currents are
okay.
crazy. And to talk about the down current, it's
Mm.
I haven't really dove in many other spots around the world. I mean, compared to Florida, the currents were nothing, but you can see whirlpools like 3 meters tall, maybe more. It's really, it's wild to see. It's like whitewater rapids in a lot of these
Yeah.
spots. And there's
So
down current, sideways current, and it's float line management is so important. Like a lot of
yeah.
these spots might be like a tiny little island 50 meters across, and the current can change just in an instant. And you got to keep your floats close to you, like have your line can get wrapped around a rock, and there's no way you're swimming against the current, not even
Yeah.
close. And so like when that happens, you need to fire your gun, obviously in a safe direction, so that because the gun will be ripped out of your hands otherwise. There's if your line's tangled, and then you're trying to untangle your line with a loaded gun, and by then the shooting line will have popped off, and it's basically just pointing at you, and you're trying to all kinds of stuff can go wrong.
Man, it's crazy. So, I mean, talk to me about a time where like you've freaked yourself out with current, and how do you manage it? Like, talk to me about what are your strategies for managing this hectic current? So, you're looking deliberately for like these tidal channels with massive current, hopefully hitting a pressure point. That's where we're going to get the bait, and therefore the dog tooth or the. But so we're deliberately putting ourselves in these environments for drifts. What are your strategies for keeping everyone safe, or at least keeping yourself safe? If you just
so a big one is float line management. Like, most people will have 2 floats on the end of their line. I've got 2 of these Ocean Hunter from New Zealand floats.
Yeah.
They're so many atmospheres. They're so big and so strong. They're great floats. I love them. And anyways, everybody's got 2 floats. And so everybody's got a 30-meter line, 100-foot line. And so the biggest thing is getting tangled with each other, and then getting tangled on like rocks and stuff that are either sticking out or like 1 meter under the water. And so basically, how can I describe this for audio? Like, you've got your gun in one hand, obviously. And then I try and keep my floats. I hold the line about 3 or 4 meters away from the floats. Yep. Also, so that trailing behind me is not my floats, but just the slack of the line. And that way you're not going to get tangled up on your buddy's line, and you're less likely to get tangled up on rocks and stuff. And so sort of as you're swimming to wherever you want to be, you're looking for the pressure point. I'll be sort of like pulling the line up and up, pulling the floats closer and closer and closer. It's just part of my swimming thing. And then eventually I've got my floats 2 or 3 meters away from me, with the line in one hand and then my spear gun in the other. And then it's
so do you have it coiled, or do you have it hanging down in lengths? You coil the
it's not
line
coiled, just sort of like hanging behind me. Okay. The float line, the float line is pretty buoyant.
Yeah.
So
I watched one of your vids where you got a little bit tangled, I think, with a wahoo, and then it ended up tearing off. Have I got that right? Or was it a
wahoo? I mean, I've had plenty of wahoo tear off.
And you just like when a float line, I mean, this is a good one, like where your line tangles around your leg or something, and you just end up putting more tension on a shooting line than you wanted to, particularly with a crap shot and a fish tears off.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that was at the Fads. That was just stupid. I was a little rusty. Like when I go out with a float line, like I'm going on a doggy trip in about a month and a half now, and the first day, you're really kind of just getting used to diving with 2 floats in the line and a giant gun the size of a tree, so that time with the wahoo, it was around like the end of my fin, and it wasn't the best shot in the fish, and it ended up breaking free. It might have broken free anyways, but it definitely did because it had no slack.
You've touched on a couple of really interesting things there. So like largely you're reef hunting. Every now and then you're getting out for these big blue water expeditions. One of the things you touched on that I can 100% relate to, and I think a lot of people can, is the first day or two when you're out doing something, you haven't done it for a while, you tend to be really rusty and shit. And I'm hoping everyone is like that, at least to some level. How do you, like, there's 2 things there. I think guys want to come out and do like a blue water trip, and, every day you're out there is like money and time. And so a lot of guys will try and punch a 4 or 5 day, blue water expedition in. And sometimes you lose a day or 2 just because you're rusty and stuff like that. How do you, what's your sort of rules for how long you go out for on a blue water trip? And how do you factor in that rusty period, and what do you do to overcome it?
Yeah. So I've like, you see people who will go on these trips and like they buy a brand new gun, say from Andre Spear Guns, when they arrive to Bali, and then the next day they go out. Like, in my opinion, that's not the right way to do it. You need to spend at least a day in the pool with the guns. Like, you got to bring a couple of spears and know each spear, know that every single one is going to shoot straight. You can't be unpackaging your gun once you arrive to whatever remote spot you're going. So you got to pool test the gun, be familiar with it, know that it's going to shoot straight. You don't want to find out that something's going wrong when you're all the way there. And the other thing, like diving with the float line, like if you could just bring your big tuna gun out with you wherever you are, and just, I don't know, if you're in Australia, just try and spear kingfish with a 160 centimeter gun. Not because it's the right gun, but maybe just because you want to get used to like maneuvering it in the water. And so you're not learning on day one.
How to shoot it again, how to maneuver with it, how to swim with it. how to duck dive with it. All of these things kind of like you take for granted when you know your gun really well, but when you have forgotten because you haven't used it for so long or you've been using a different setup, it's really painful.